So welcome everybody to today's the third in our series of Unified Commerce, this time on how to deliver, headed up by Dave Gore, Head of Industries at BGSS, who will be joined by Tim Larkin, MD at Situ, and Nick Fletcher, Head of Digital Experience at Rafa. So without further ado, I'd like to hand over to Dave for this session.
Cheers, Karen. Thank you very much. So as Karen said, today's session is all around how you deliver, or how we deliver. And it's off the back of the two previous sessions that we've ran within this webinar series. So Tim initially spoke about retail's new normal in the first session and very much looked at things from a store perspective and how technology can support and be an enabler for retailers within that environment. Nick then very kindly joined us for the second session and spoke around how a digital first organization such as Rafa is looking to accelerate e-commerce and how they have responded and adapted due to COVID and what they're looking to do over the next 12 to kind of 18 months. And I'm here to talk about how you can actually pull that all together and provide some kind of insight and expertise on what that means from an implementation perspective, but also how to do it in a much more reduced risk and cost-effective approach. So we're all aware that the last couple of months have been hugely volatile for retail, with COVID actually massively impacting not only how we shop, but our expectations and perceptions of that. It's led to a real heightened expectation with regards to what we will want and demand moving into the future as well. And that's leading to a real crunch point for retailers and how they actually drive a seamless online and offline journey and what they need to do moving forward. The current reality is that that is actually quite disjointed. And there's a huge opportunity here to actually reevaluate how technology, change, digital, data can all actually work together to accelerate growth and drive a greater degree of competitiveness across the industry. We think that the key thing here is how to actually tackle this challenge, but emerge as a much more resilient yet digitally focused organization. And that will be a key answer or a key question that a number of retailers need to answer. What is apparent as well is that the crisis has highlighted one kind of long known point, but one which is often ignored, which is that tech and change will never go away and that they are key enablers to actually increased innovation and value. And it's actually how you now utilize those that's really going to position you for growth and success moving forward. And it's how you then execute across all your various online and offline initiatives that's really going to be the proof in the pudding in that matter. Out of all of this, one thing for us though that is still missing within it, or that isn't necessarily hugely addressed consistently, is actually what the consumer wants. So the ability to look at the bigger picture, being able to put kind of perception and a bias towards action into play, and not just focusing on what is happening or has happened, is going to be key. So for us, it's all around actually taking some key learnings and then understanding what to implement and how. So we'll be focusing on 6 key areas and then tying it up with a kind of cheat hint tip around actually what that means from a delivery perspective. So the first area that we want to focus on is all around actually adding value. And this is an area where retail is consistently lagging as well. It's something which is only going to grow in importance. And if you actually look at retailers currently, the information and the data and the insight that they're using is only really telling them around what their consumers have actually done. So it's in the past tense. And too frequently, a number of them are making assumptions around what that data has asked for and can answer, and therefore informing them what the consumer wants. It's a problem that needs to be addressed. So you need to focus on that initial value. And it's interesting here in that a lot of retailers are currently focusing on the shareholder piece and not necessarily the customer one. So it's now more than ever much more necessary to focus on that consumer angle and the value that you can bring to it. In the previous sessions, both Nick and Tim have spoken very articulately around the rise of community and how that is actually gaining traction and greater importance within retail, and kind of the recent boycott of Facebook by a number of retailers is a very good example of this. But it's now more than ever that actually we need to communicate value through purpose and concern and not products and price. And that is a fundamental step change for a number of retailers to do, both structurally as an organization, but also outwardly and externally to their market and their consumers. So these days, a lot of retailers need to try much harder to create and communicate value in everything that they do. I think it's pretty clear for all of us that consumers have what can be determined as an overwhelming kind of abundance of choice at this moment. So it's kind of a buyer's market in that they have high expectations, but little time and or loyalty to kind of really spare if a retailer were to fail them. So it's clear here that value doesn't necessarily relate just to price. It's about the experience or what you expect from that experience against the kind of given action or the relative cost of it. So fundamentally, the results and the efforts of your value creation are measured in your customer perception of it. So therefore, you really need to ensure that you focus on it and you drive it on a consistent basis, because they'll actually buy into you and help you deliver in the long term if they like you and they need you. And it's apparent that things such as product functionality, kind of quality, service, branding, customer incentives, the actual broader experience and the relationship you make is actually really going to help with that. And that's where tech is a key enabler to it. So again, kind of referencing Tim and Nick, they've spoken from two different angles, one around the store and one around kind of online. It's clear here that both of them have an alignment around actually its quality, its service, its experience, and the relationships that's going to help drive that greater impact and that greater success and that commercial next best action. And it's really important here that when you look at delivering, that you actually continually keep that focus in play and have it as a core priority. It's there that you can actually then add the value and really deliver against your promise to the consumer and make sure that you're actually identifying people who have the shared values around you as a business, but also that you can actually start to create products and messages which really resonate and land with them and actually build a head of steam around it. Another key area is around the data piece. So with the consumer, we're now getting huge amounts of data across any kind of customer touch point on a continual basis. And Nick and kind of Tim will laugh at this point because I've always often mentioned it, but we have a bit of a saying that if cash is king, then clean customer data is the prince. So at the moment, if you look at the likes of kind of Amazon, Alibaba, or any other large marketplace, they're redefining the traditional business models and really raising the bar for what customers expect, but being driven through that data analysis and that data intelligence. And they're actually forcing a number of traditional retailers to accelerate their own decision-making processes, with data being a core component and a key feature of this. What's actually really relevant here, and what I have an opinion around, is that those who fail to invest in data at scale will actually now really lag in their ability to make accurate and timely decisions that really negatively then impact their ability to compete. So it's very clear that around any implementation that you now want to do, that data piece is of critical importance to actually have that intelligence to understand not only what the consumer has done, but to be able to confidently predict what they will do, and what you can offer them is going to be absolutely key. And it's therefore that those industry leaders are now going to be faced with a greater degree of competition because they do not have that ability at this moment in time. It's also pretty relevant and pretty clear that the new movers and shakers, so again, kind of Alibaba, Amazon, they don't have that same cost structure, and they can move much more quickly to serve their customers as well. And at the core of it, that monetized data is the real opportunity here. So how they can activate, enhance, and create new value from existing behaviors, from existing relationships and existing consumers to really drive that commercial return on investment. There's the other piece as well around actually understanding what consumers are doing, and therefore developing a better understanding of the value exchange that data provides, and then being able to act on and share those insights both internally within the brand, but also externally, so that you're actually positioning and marketing yourself much more thoroughly and much more effectively. And that ultimately is a really strong win-win situation for everybody involved, that you're actually embedding data across the entire business, across all of your functions, and really using it to inform and to support investment decisions to really drive a brand forward. Ultimately, having a better grip of your data around it will give you that greater availability, that greater customer service, that greater quality, and that greater connection to customers, both in store and online as well. A key facet of it as well is what I term the ABBA factor, which is again a little bit trite, but knowing me, knowing you, a little bit cheesy. But regardless of it, from a channel perspective, retailers really need to get on top of knowing their customer across all channels, and that has to be a top priority moving forward. So you can have the best retail location, you could have the fanciest front-end website, but if the service is lacking and that true connection to the customer is, then you're not actually going to win any new custom, and arguably you're going to stagnate or even at worst die. So the expectations are higher than ever, and the modern consumer won't tolerate anything less than that is absolutely kind of stellar experience. And Nick did a great job last week of talking around kind of service design and user experience, and how Rafa have actually placed that at the heart of what they do, and how actually they look at that consumer lens and make sure that anything that they do from a branding perspective and from a commerce perspective is linked back to their core consumer. And I believe currently that that is best in class and kind of best of breed, that those who really know their consumers and actually provide the right levels of choice around how and where to shop are those who are accelerating and doing particularly well in this current market, and will continue to do so. Ultimately, if you don't meet their expectations and offer convenience or price or product or a solution that resonates with them, it's pretty clear that a competitor will actually come in and now offer that and knock you out of it. So the main focus here should be on how you want your consumers to actually experience your brand and the shopping experience itself. So the focus here should be around kind of your infrastructure, so how you can help to hold that customer experience to the highest of standards. So these are some of the basics that we expect really. So kind of stock availability around store assistance, to be able to actually say we've got a technology-enabled assisted selling solution that we're actually able to buy in store, but fulfill from either another store or actually a different distribution center, or even to allow a store to become an extended dark store as well. So all of these are possible for bricks and mortar. And if then you start to marry it with the online experience, the proposition actually kind of accentuates one another and allows to that accelerated performance piece. And it's really important here, and a real kind of key point is around actually the brand promise in the image. So again, across whatever channel that you are communicating with and that your consumers choose to engage, it's imperative that you actually connect with them within that specific channel, and the solution is appropriate to it as well. So don't assume or think that you know your customers' expectations or desires or how they shop. It's actually all around understanding the work that you need to do, the research that you need to undertake, and how this will enrich the delivery and the experience of anything that you implement moving forward as well. I've touched on channels, and it's again clear that there are a number of secondary channels that don't necessarily get the attention or the resources that they deserve within retail. So instead of viewing the channel landscape as either a distinct website or a YouTube page or a Facebook page or kind of TikTok or Instagram, which is growing in kind of prevalence and importance, retailers now really need to think of actually having one primary channel, but then a number of actual micro channels which support the overall strategy. So therefore, the ultimate objective would be to bring as much as your brand experience to these micro channels and really ensure that you engage with the customers in the world of their choosing, but still reinforce what makes you as a brand or a retailer unique. And it's really important not to try and force them into the world of what you perceive them to be or want to have around the primary channel. So it's really understanding what that journey looks like and actually being available and appropriate around what they want and how they can execute it. So instead of actually running with a number of different ideas across many mediums and many channels, our approach would actually suggest that you need to take a single idea, translate it across those channels, but then execute it consistently with a consistent message so that it's delivered across those multiple touch points and across those devices to achieve it. And that's where we see a huge amount of success. So if you look at the likes of Nike, Adidas, Lululemon, for example, these are brands that are consistently performing over and above others around their channel strategy, not because they're doing so many things across all of them, but because they're actually taking one consistent message and one consistent approach and applying that in the most relevant and appropriate manner across those touch points so that it really resonates and lands with consumers on a consistent basis. I think it's also really easy here to forget the impact that stores can have when you talk about a channel. So they're a huge, huge channel. Kind of 80% of sales are still driven through it. And COVID has taught us that they're not going to go away, but they will potentially lessen with importance. But again, here, tech can actually really help. So if you look at something like AI, you can really start to support store assistants around that retail experience. And therefore, what they're providing to a consumer on a consistent basis as well. So the greater kind of intelligence, the greater empathy, the greater recognition are already hired in from a store associate perspective. What tech can give them is the additional tools and information to support and build on this and really run with unimagined possibilities at the minute. So put simply, it's the right channel is optimized for the appropriate user and for the relevant device. We then come on to the tech aspect for it as well. So this is something which we as an organization, BGSS, know very, very well, but it's an area which is often overlooked, underestimated, and under-resourced. It comes down to 4 key priorities for us. So it's performance, dependability, cost, and operations. If you can actually nail your tech strategy across all of those, you will be hugely successful. But across all of them, it's really important that you need to understand that actually to deploy quickly, you need to ensure that you have flexibility, so kind of anywhere on any device, but you've also got the option to scale and actually that it is cost effective. And that's a key thing here. So we talk about modernizing in a manageable way and in a staged way. And I think that's a key part and key learning for everything that we've had around COVID, in the sense that modernizing a legacy state is going to take a long time. It's going to be highly complex and probably, or more likely, very expensive. But now is a better time to do it than ever before. So there's a need to keep up with the Joneses. There's also a need to ensure that your channels aren't necessarily getting quickly overwhelmed. So modernizing in a bite-sized manner will really help to run things much more smoothly without demanding time, money, effort, resources at such a scale that it's just uneconomical for you. So for us, it's all around actually identifying prioritized legacy systems and essentially strangling the reliance on these. So it's even more important when you consider now that retailers have these multiple channels. So here we talk about kind of business process automation. We talk about kind of a service orientated architecture, and above all kind of integration. All of these are essentially pretty dull. They're not the glamorous part of retail at all. But if you neglect them, there's no shiny front end in the world which is actually going to overcome the challenges or paper over those cracks either. And that's a really important point to make, is that fundamentally tech here is the tool to help retailers do better, do things faster, and do things much more efficiently. And choosing the right technology for the business is of absolute paramount, because when it comes down to it, retailers don't often prioritize what those tech decisions are. And what they typically find is that they buy into something that's incredibly scalable, but don't necessarily understand that the additional resources and the additional work and the additional level of bespoke engineering that's required could actually put the endpoint out of reach for them. So there's a need to find something that's much more appropriate and much more relevant and robust in this moment. And it's something that needs to fit budget, but it also needs to make sure that it drives value whilst also not disrupting another part of the business. There's also a level of integration that does promote consistency across these as well. So when we talk about that channel agnostic experience, which I've just touched upon, integration is key here. And it's really important that across all of those touch points, you're integrating with the right systems, with the right information, with the right data to provide the next best action for those individuals, and to really start driving that positive understanding and that positive next best action, and ultimately that loyalty to a brand and to a retailer on a consistent basis. And it's someone who can accomplish that will have a very distinct and in our view, a probably lasting competitive advantage on a consistent basis as well. It then comes to the final point, which is very much around what you need to do to deliver. So I'm a big football fan. Wasn't necessarily a big fan of Raheem Sterling when he joined my club, which is Manchester City, but he's on record of saying that actually he's done tens of thousands of hours worth of effort and investment around his skills as an individual within the football profession. And it's something that still rings true within retail itself. So kind of 10,000 hours worth of investment and effort, an individual becomes an expert at something. And the same goes for that delivery execution as well. Too frequently, retail generally has faced a number of challenges because it's inflexible, it's monolithic, and it's led by legacy. And this has meant that it's too frequently struggled to adapt to a new reality and new incumbents coming into play. And it's perfectly understandable. As we've said, it's legacy, it's been there for years, and it's the way that it's been done. But the challenges, so again, think kind of the marketplaces, think kind of the recent rise of D2C, are really disrupting this model and actually making delivery of new solutions and innovations much more difficult and much more challenging. but they've done it through actually looking at what makes retail much easier and much more inclusive. And how they've done it is actually by looking at what needs to be prioritized, what needs to be invested in, and actually really nailing the absolute basics on a consistent basis. So very simply, it's actually doing the right thing, doing it at the right time, and doing it really fundamentally well. And it's clear that the basics have a real role in retail operations and the relationships with their customers, as they actually enable engagement, they enable education, and it really does enable and ultimately drive the experience of what a consumer wants and what a brand needs to execute against. And in the post-COVID world, it's these three areas that will be of huge importance moving forward. It's also important to note that through delivering well and consistently, there are broader gains in productivity, so enhanced speed and efficiency. There's actually increased velocity around services and products, so actually getting newness into customers much more frequently and ahead of competitors. But it also provides significant value through that increased revenue realization and the reduced costs. So there's a real commercial business case here that a number of retailers need to start grappling with and understanding to start getting ahead of the game and actually landing change as we move into summer and into kind of 2021 next year. So to wrap it up, there are 4 key things that we think that a number of retailers now need to do for delivery and to ensure that from a seamless perspective, they get the right mix between online and offline. So the first is design for speed and simplicity. So ensure that your products are both fast to complete and require as little input as possible. So aim for something which is effortlessly efficient and will delight the customer. The second point is around designing for responsiveness. So too frequently, organizations are happy to frustrate customers by having unresponsive solutions. So here, a retailer really needs to aim for ease, speed, and utility. The third point is around designing to complete. So again, it's clear here, it is not for you as a retailer or brand, but it is for your actual customer. So if abandonment is an issue, provide a feeling of progression and ownership, and aim for people to invest in the product through the experience that you provide and ensure that you do delight them at every point and reduce that friction and that opportunity to abandon. And the final one is actually designed to deliver. So the fable stands. If you've got a negative experience, you're 5 times more likely to tell people than when you've actually had a great one. So if you aim to engage and delight across the entire experience and actually to deliver on your core customer proposition and the value that you want to present into the market, you'll find that things are much easier, that you actually gain traction within your customer base, and actually you do have a lasting and competitive advantage. Thank you.
So Dave, I think there was just looking at the Q&As, there's one question that's come in from Neil, and it could be a question for all 3 of us really. And Neil's asked, how do you see loyalty schemes evolving for retailers going forward as consumers have such high expectations as you mentioned? And do you see any best in class examples of that at the moment? So.
Oh, that's a very good question.
I'm happy to.
I could say Nick.
No, I think I'm happy to go in, and then that gives Nick 30 seconds thinking time, because actually I think that Rafa is a really good example of how they approach it. Because if you think back to the session that we had with Nick, where he talked about community, content, and then commerce again, and if you think that back to what we talked about in the first session around being really clear on who your consumer is, building that community out, a consistent and compelling point of view, I think the answer is it kind of depends, because those consumers can want different things. Some loyalty schemes work great if it's I want to accumulate a number of points and I can get a discount. Other retailers like a Rafa, it's more about I'm part of this community and club, and my loyalty is driven by events, upfront information about when new products could be launching, etc. So I think the answer, my question is that I think it depends. It's like anything. When you have a strategy, it has to be appropriate to your consumer, and you have to think about that, put the consumer first and then work back. So in some cases, loyalty programs, they can be very different, but that's okay because they work for that particular kind of consumer. And when I think about a best in class, if it's right for the consumer that points make prizes, that's cool. But on the other hand, if it's actually, it's a way of life for me and I'm ingrained in the Rafa moment and I want to be part of the club, then what I'm looking for that drives my loyalty is different from that. So I think Rafa's a great example of the kind of community that I would say is has it right, but for that reason that they really start with the community and they work back from the consumer.
Yeah, so we don't see the RCC actually as a loyalty scheme. It's designed for plenty of our best customers are RCC members, but we also it's not currently going to scale to our entire active customer base because of the very hands-on nature of it. So loyalty, even internally, is a question that we often have around is the RCC loyalty, and we say no, it's about the people and those connections, the friendships and memories they make on the bike, and that isn't something that you can scale, to your point, Tim, around kind of like a earn and burn points scheme that plenty of retailers have them, but I think it's a case of is it meaningful for that customer? That's ultimately what we're trying to that's the nut we're trying to crack. And I think for me, the one that always resonates is like best in class is someone like Nespresso, who have been omni-channel for, well, at least I had the feeling that everything, I'm sure that people who work there are like, we've got loads more to do, but the Nespresso Club from its very inception has been designed to to evoke the love of the coffee, and that's an interesting place for them at the moment. There was an article in the Guardian just over the weekend sort of talking about the backstory to Nespresso and how they respond in this age of not just of COVID, but of a disruption of the entire approach to coffee. New wave coffee from down under has kind of taken the UK by storm. We all love our flat whites, I'm assuming. They've got that's their moat, right? The Nespresso Club is a moat to help them. I think they execute it so consistently. Like if I were to still be going up to London, I'd pop into the Nespresso store at St Pancras, and they'd be able to help me choose the pods based on my last online order. They'd be like, oh, we saw this, how did you like it? Then they could give you recommendations off the back of it. They execute it so well, and there are some loyalty benefits to it, but it's not like it's not like a points-based system. It's just over time, I think it's depending on the amount of time you've owned and been registered with Nespresso. So again, to your point, Dave, around data, they've got this really, really clear objective and strategy around getting people in, and then keeping that customer data up to date over the years. It's always been a go-to for me, so I didn't actually need that 30 seconds I already had my example ready to go there. But yeah, they just they just execute it consistently. I think that's another thing as well that we're all learning, is how do you execute consistently. There's an example that I always tell my team, which is that I have quite a lot of cycling socks, funnily enough, and one of the things I used to get frustrated about was on a Sunday morning, I'd be going out to ride and I'd be like, these socks are going to take forever to go on because they've come out the washing machine. I've not turned them inside. I've not turned them the right way out and paired them up. So on a Sunday morning, I'm ready to go. And that is the kind of behavior that takes a lot of time to learn. It's one of those frustrating things. But as you start to do it, and it's the same in digital, like instilling a useful, like a consistent behavior like that, and just repeating and repeating and repeating it, it means that you have such a smooth operation, whether it's going for a ride, whether it's making sure that that everyone understands the importance of accuracy of stock levels across the entire estate, whether that's digital or retail. It's just a hygiene factor, and I think that was today's point. That was really, we've all got learning to do always, but that's one thing that I try and focus my team on, because it ultimately it ensures the low water mark for the experience is always raised, while you can still go on the top side to delight people. It's a bit of a Kano model for you there, I guess, on a hump day lunchtime call, but that's kind of where my head's at.
Yeah, I think someone like Nike, actually, I mean, I know they're often kind of trotted out, but Nike Plus is, for me, kind of best in class. So it's really redefining loyalty. It's moving away from kind of that points-based kind of piece that's typically where a number of retailers are played, and it now much more focuses on that kind of exclusivity and that experiential kind of benefit piece. Really kind of strong proposition, underpinned by data. They execute it brilliantly well. How it kind of renders across both desktop, mobile, but also within kind of the bricks and mortar environment as well is first class. And I think they actually are very good at challenging themselves around how to improve the program on kind of an incremental basis as well. So they've recently added kind of free shopping to it. They've added in kind of in-store rewards for members as well. So it's a case of, as they're going along, they're really learning around what's working, what isn't, and then reinforcing and then redefining actually that loyalty program off the back of it. I think another kind of interesting one, and this is probably more of a reflection of where I am in my life at this moment in time, is Jojo Maman Bebe, which is more through my wife, but they're very good at actually mapping your child's development stages to offerings and personalized content on a consistent basis as well. So every time a child goes through a development leap, it's a oh, they should now be picking up on kind of their cognitive skills. So you need to look at this book, or actually they should need these wellies as the feature of going by X amount. And whilst it's quite commercial in view, it's actually really handy for a father who isn't necessarily that up to date on kind of where the child's up to and kind of different clothes and different requirements, where I just get an email dropped in and think, oh, actually we do need that, and it's a really great thing. So two different examples there, but two organizations who are doing it well.
So we've just had a thank you for the answers in there. So thanks to Neil for the question, and it looks like we did a decent job answering those for Neil. It was interesting when we were in there that, you know, as we talked about that, it was a couple of other things that have come out of the sessions. You talked about the Nespresso and the St Pancras conversation, Nick, and we talked about sell where they shop, you know, or sell where they are. And it kind of brought out in a couple of the sessions where you were talking about how Rafa also thinks through that lens about, you know, that makes you think about things in a different light. And interestingly, they know your journey through St Pancras and knew it was a great idea to put that Nespresso store right on your route every morning, so you would come in. And likewise, back, if you think about that, you know, it forces ideas. I remember when we were at Levi's and we talked about this idea of, you know, we're going to sell where they are, and then the whole idea of going to festivals came out of that, because we knew that our consumer would be there, the inherent love of music linked to the brand. So that idea of selling where people are, I think, you know, it was an interesting one. Just reminded me when you were talking about the Nespresso piece there, they seem to be, you know, just have that knack of popping the store where you need to be. But I'm sure, well, I know it's driven out of data in terms of where the consumer is and the white mapping that they do for their space.
We've had we have a few mobile clubhouses that are sort of based on the French H van that used to accompany the Tour de France as the broom wagon. And we've had one of those touring kind of like the North Yorkshire climbs over the last few weeks, which has been quite an interesting one to, you know, not selling clothing, but literally just selling coffee, funnily enough. And yeah, this, you know, those surprise and delight moments where people are can be really powerful.
Absolutely. So so Dave, I don't know if just from your point of view, I think what's, you know, I was just going to take, you know, just 2 seconds just to kind of reflect on, you know, having done the first session, listen to Nick and then to yourself, just to kind of see if that had kind of changed my mind about anything I'd said in the first session, but also just to kind of give, you know, my kind of take out as I walk away from the third session, if that's okay, just as a quick summary. So I think that I've been delighted to be asked to be involved in this, and as with all these things, you know, you kind of learn, you learn every day. And I think when we came into this, I was like, you know, the whole thing about the COVID-19, you know, my healthy challenge was, you know, some things will remain the same and some things will change. And I think although some things do remain the same, what has happened is those things are the same. The needs around them have only been heightened and hastened. And I think that, you know, the bit I always talk about in terms of what makes a good brand, the community, the consistency, the compelling point of view, the great execution and the leadership, I think that's only been heightened in listening to these 3 sessions we've done. And as we did in the last session, if I put those 4 lenses over Rafa, we drew a really strong conclusion that, you know, that's a brand that will join the likes of the Patagonias, etc. And we won't be surprised when we hear about their success in the future, because of the fact that they actually have that community content and commerce. And all we're doing now is building something on at the end that says, how do we unify that commerce to bring the worlds together? And I think that, so for me, that kind of like understanding what makes a brand and a business great is still very much clear. And then going to the other side, you turn in terms of the execution, you know, the how to do it was that bit about the unification, as we mentioned, but your bit about the data as well. You know, more and more the conversations are about single view of consumer and single view of data, and working with providers to give that to brands, and having that consistency of data and being able to then execute it, as you say, start with the idea, then push it out consistently across the channels rather than a different approach by channel, is another thing from me that I've really taken out as a clear message from these 3 sessions. And then the third one is around, again, I am going to be passionate about this because of my history, is about, the power of the sales teams in store. They've always been important. I think they will only be even more important in the future. And it's like, and empowering them, having all that information at hand to do a great job by the consumers, again, I think will only become more important. People want convenience, people want experience. They actually want both of those, and now they want to be safe as well when they come into the store. So yes, some things do stay the same, some things do change, but what does change is only really heightened and hastened by by what's happened with the COVID-19. And as you said, people are now looking to do things at speed now. The legacy, the example I use with the financial community, where they're now looking at brands, and one of the lenses they pass over is the word legacy, which I always used to think was a very positive thing. But now they look at it and say, if there's legacy, and it's not legacy in terms of age of leadership, but it's like legacy thinking, legacy leases, legacy systems, that now almost becomes an avoid for the financial institutions when they see too much legacy in a business now. And I think that whole piece around the unification of the two worlds is really important. And it's been great to be involved. And Nick, I really enjoyed the session on Rafa, and it was kind of like, that whole piece around creating the moments that lead to the momentum and sell where they are. The fact that when you went into COVID-19, you took different levels of approach. You used it to speed up. Things look 5 years ahead, but let's deliver in 5 months. So a very kind of strategic view of what was going to happen with the brand. But then some super pragmatic things about, the returns policy. I think you mentioned you moved that out to 100 days very quickly, knowing that so I think, again, that just demonstrates there's a brand that's very clear about who it is and has that ability to think about the strategic piece, but also to be very pragmatic when it comes to day-to-day delivery. So some really great takeouts for me, and yeah, just delighted to have been part of it. Thank you.
Yeah, no, it's been great.
It's interesting you mentioned that 100-day policy, actually, Tim, because looking at the data, we didn't see lots of customers taking advantage. Like the long tail of returns didn't actually materially change. But again, the mindset you have to be in to go, okay, we're going to change this and monitor it, as opposed to, well, that kind of incumbent mindset of like, well, this is going to, what if, you start getting into that territory. It's it was quite interesting. It was really refreshing for us to be able to look back and go, actually, nothing has materially changed, and we can keep that as part of the proposition for the time being. So yeah, the ability to make that decisions and the quality of the decisions is something that I think most people are going to have to face more readily now than before.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's a key bit. So kind of both of you spoke very kind of compellingly about leadership in the 2 previous sessions and how that kind of sets that culture piece. So how kind of now speed is at a premium. There needs to be that scalability. There needs to be the robustness, the kind of pragmatism, but also that quality aspect of it. And I think it's very much a case that those organizations and the way that kind of you were speaking about Rafa, Nick particularly, is that it's very much an organization that's focused on making change quickly, but empowering people to have accountability for it and take responsibility. And I think that's a great thing in the sense that it's allowed you to move very, very quickly, to be very responsive and actually to drive real positive change in an organization. And I think it's something that you said last week that really resonated with me, where as an organization we talk about fail fast, fail forward, whereas you actually kind of challenged us and then turned around and said, well, it's not about failing fast, it's actually about learning fast. Yeah. And actually really then taking those learnings and running with them, both whether positive or negative. And that was actually quite an insightful point for me, where I was thinking, well, yeah, it's actually a similar message, but it's actually a much different or a much stronger way of looking at something and positioning it and ensuring that actually you are in a position where you can drive quality, speed, scale, pragmatism because of that mindset. So yeah, that was great.
Cool. Glad to be of help.
Always. Yeah, that was my that was all from me, Dave. Was just to be able to have the chance just to get it right in my head in terms of the key takeouts. And so yeah, thank you. I think there's and thank you for bringing it together in terms of, you say, to bringing it back down to how we actually deliver it as well. No, so
yeah, thank you to you both. It's been absolutely fantastic, Nick, particularly from a Rafa perspective as well, and for joining us on your holiday. That's a commitment beyond. So thank you for that. And Tim, always for your support and always great to have you on it. We are releasing a ebook off the back of this as well. So kind of pulling the whole series together around actually how you unify commerce across both online and offline and what that looks like from a delivery piece. So it's going live at 3 o'clock UK time today and 4 o'clock European time. So if you're interested in that, please look to download it across either both BGSS's website platform or Citu's as well. And we'll also start pushing it onto some of the social media channels. But again, thank you very much for joining us during your lunch. Really appreciate it, and hope you enjoyed it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, thanks very much, guys. Again, it was a great series. So anyone that missed any of the sessions, I will be sending a link out to that at the end of the day today, along with the ebook. So keep an eye out for that, and I hope to see you all soon.